So mind you, prison is just a cog in the wheel. It starts with the school, the unequal access to education, which is deeply disturbing. The fact that some of the same companies, and I'm not going to call them out, but some of the same companies that are serving food in prisons are also serving them in schools. Some of the same architects.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, this is a fact. Some of the same architects of prisons are actually building the schools. Now, this is and I'm going to just say it, and please don't send me none of your hate mail. Why is it that we've got all these metal detectors in inner city schools and it ain't been a school shooting yet in these schools? But yet the places, right, that these school shootings are happening at, and y'all know what I'm talking about, it's not those same measures. So what happens is we are already at a young age preparing children for prison. They go through metal detectors to be educated. I use educated in air quotes. Then they're being fed some of the same food that they'll be served in prison later on. They are building prisons based on test scores in middle school.
Oh my God, I never even thought about that.
But that's how they do. I mean, you don't build a hotel and not want occupancy. In fact, you encourage it. So when they build prisons, they are not just hoping for occupancy, they are doing things to promote it, to get people's minds there, to get people ready. And it's disturbing. You know, when we talk about, and this is the thing about prison reform. People talk about prison reform and it becomes so one-sided. Why is it that we aren't talking about the fact that there's an active effort to keep prisons not just opening, but to keep it going? I had a prosecutor, she didn't know my backstory. She didn't know I'd been in prison. She just knew I graduated from Harvard Law. So she got real comfortable with me. These were exact words. She said, prison is a growth industry, with a smile on her face.
Because she's probably invested in it.
Well, she is invested in it. And why don't we talk about the fact that when they talk about closing Rikers, there's a whole group of people who have said, but what will happen to our jobs if we close it? So look, I'm not here to one way or the other, whatever, but let's have a real discussion. Let's talk about the fact that there are people who are profiting, and not just these fat cats, you know, who are invested stock-wise in it. I'm talking about people whose jobs are invested in your son being in prison. So they gave your son 20 years because they need him in prison to fuel somebody else's salary. But that never really gets talked about.
No. Absolutely. I have never heard that before. So you're the first one. So I want you to expand. I want you to go in a little bit deeper on that.
Okay, so I'll go a little bit deeper. It amazes me that they say, oh, you know, the cost to house a prisoner is like $40,000 a year. I've heard that before. I'm like, okay, all right. So who running around the other $39,000? Because I can tell you from being in there, they said it costs all this money to feed and all this.
No, it doesn't.
Most you can get fed is chicken and rice. Exactly.
No, it doesn't.
You already know that. For those of us who've been on the inside. But let's talk about the cost that is, I'll tell you where part of that cost is given. Salaries. The salaries of, again, I'm not here to demonize people or professions, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about the fact that there are wardens, there are associate wardens, there's an entire team of correctional staff, there are the line staff that are there. There are people that provide the food, that do the laundry, excuse me. They do some of the laundering too, but that's another discussion. There are nurses that work for it, there are counselors, there are case managers. It's a business.
It is a business.
It's an entire business. So
Definitely.
When you talk about closing Rikers, let's not just talk about the fact that we've reduced 10,000 to now 7,500 inmates, and now, well, you know, we're making progress. Let's talk about all the hundreds of people that work there.
That's true.
And the salaries that are being paid.
That they get
when
paid,
I went to Rikers, now they may not let me back on because I was just there recently to do some speaking engagements. Somebody told me before I got there, when you get there, because I was only in the federal system, so I didn't know anything about the state. They said when you get there and you look at the parking lot, it's going to look like a BMW Audi dealership. And they were right. The cars that people are driving, it's amazing. The salaries are phenomenal. There is probably no other profession in New York City where you can just have graduated high school and make $70,000 to $80,000 to $90,000 a year.
Wow.
But we don't talk about that. So what happens is when the discussion of prison reform happens, it's only centered around inmates, prisoners, and what they did and why they need to stay there. But we don't talk about that there's an actual. What do you think the unions are there for? For the correctional officer unions. These unions are there to say, wait a minute, we've got to protect our jobs. We've got to protect our people. So until we discuss that, I don't know what's going to happen with prison reform until we talk about the fact that people are made, and we haven't even discussed the fact that 25% of the prisons that we know of in this country are privatized.
Yes.
So for y'all that are listening, you can Google this, look this up. I'm not making this up. CCCA owns over 20. It's a conglomerate. They're a private company. They own 25% of the prisons in this country that we know of. And one of Obama's initiatives was to bring us off of the private prison system. But because it was an executive order and most of those executive orders were repealed, we're still back on track with that. Mm-hmm. Private means this. I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence. I want you to know. That means you can buy stock in it. You buy stock in Walmart.
Yes.
You buy stock in, Food Lion or whatever, Kroger. You buy stock in the prison. So the number one duty, and I can tell you this legally, fiduciary duty of any company is to profit their shareholders.
Absolutely.
So if you buy stock in the prison system, the number one duty of the ones that own that company is to provide profit.
But are you aware also that every inmate, I'm going to say inmate because let me just change the word. I don't like the word in. Every incarcerated individual that they have junk bonds for them?
Yes. That's so concerning. That's a whole nother discussion. But yes, absolutely.
So it's always about the profit.
It always is about. If you want to know, somebody said, "What's the golden rule?" I said, "Well, of course, love your neighbor as yourself." Doing to others as you would. What is this? You would have them do unto you. He said, "No, he who has the gold makes the rules." I said, "Oh, okay, that's the earthly golden rule." You want to know what's going on? Follow the money. And I want to say this too. People get me because they say, well, these companies are doing so well with corporate responsibility because they're hiring people who are felons or ex-felons. Okay, you haven't said anything, and I'm gonna tell you why. Let's talk about the companies that are hiring people in prison.
Yeah.
So let's talk about slave labor. Let's talk about the fact that some companies hire people who are in prison. They actually hire the prison to contract out their prisoners to make tables, chairs. It is probably it's a good chance that if you have a table or chair or furniture and you've gotten it from certain companies, that it was made by people who are in prison.
Unicor.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's the federal system. I forget what it's called. Core Craft is for the state, for New York State. So that's the other way that they make money. You have companies that go and they're able, because the 13th Amendment and 14th and 15th, which was centered around ending slavery, does not cover people who have been imprisoned. So they can pay them less than minimum wage. Mm-hmm. So I can pay one person, what minimum wage in New York is what now, $15, I think?
$15, yes.
All right. So do I want to pay $15 for that person, or can I pay the prisoner 25 cents, 30 cents on the hour to actually they're paying the prison, or they're paying the prison, and then the prison is only giving 20 or 25 cents an hour to the actual prisoner who's making it. So I want you to understand that if there's a moral issue, that's what I feel. If there's a moral issue about hiring people who are ex-felons and, they did wrong and I don't know if I want them working in my company, well, then you know what? You don't need to be hiring them when they're in prison for less than minimum wage. It's slave labor.